So as we looked at some of the things of who we are, we discovered that, we are a diverse community, and we want to be a church of diverse communities living out the gospel together. And as we looked at where people were living, we discovered that we have people who come to GCC from within a 25-kilometer radius of our city. Huge span. So because that's where we are, we started to do some demographic study around that and discovered there's about 1.1 million people within that 25K radius. And diverse groups of people, diverse in ethnicity. So you have people here like Steph and Dave, 570,000 Europeans. People here like William from an Asian descent, or people like Solomon, Pacifica or Maori folk, a whole range of diversity in ethnicities. And we want to step in and reach diverse groups of people. Not only diversity in ethnicity, but diversity in generations. So there's people like Luke here, along with his siblings, 85,000 people under the age of 5. Or people here like Elijah, 155,000 people just like him. People like William again. And then people at the other end of things, Rogers, also needing to know Jesus, wanting to reach them for Jesus too. And then that diversity is not just generational and not just ethnicity, but also belief systems. That over half the people in that area don't yet know Jesus. And we're right in this amazing location in our city, with scattered all over the city, with this vision to actually bring hope to others. And so early February, when we looked at that, we spoke about these 4 arrows that we want to grow in. Because a healthy church is about growing in all 4 of these, just as a healthy Christian is about growing in all 4 of these. And I want to camp on one of these today. We want to come and worship like we're doing today. We want to connect in deep relationships together, to grow from the inside out, but to impact. And that outward arrow is hard. Probably the hardest one out of all of them. I mean, all of them are hard when you have an outward lens and thinking about other people as they come together. It's hard. Because we naturally think about ourselves, right? And people just like me. People from the same country, speak the same language, from the same postal codes, from the same background. It's just easier to think about me and people just like me. And there's fantastic stories to tell of how local churches have provided great impact. But there's also stories to tell when that starting point has kind of been flipped around and that impact has been lost. Stories that began with churches that had a vision to love God and love others. But somewhere along the line, something happened where people became more concerned about own comfort and about themselves and their own seed and their own musical preferences and their own whatever, and it just became lost. Something so radically important to the DNA of a church, lost. From time to time, I meet up with different pastors, leaders from other churches, and often hear stories of churches that began with such a red-hot vision for God, and how people in those communities sacrificed so much to come around this red-hot vision. And yet somewhere in that, as people were sacrificing and seats were filled and all these stories were happening, the church then became comfortable. And suddenly the outward aspect was spoken about but not really practiced in life. And that red-hot, burning vision gave way to more of a red-hot temper when things didn't quite go somebody's way. Or that deep concern for people in our city became replaced by a deeper concern for our own preferences. It's so easy to happen. And that's when things go south for churches. So today, I want to kind of camp on this outward arrow, about what it means for us to stay sharp in this way, to keep having stories of what God is doing in our community. And it's into this context that Jesus told a story. Because after all, even in Jesus' day, there was a faith community, the nation of Israel, and God had this outward arrow for them too. God had chosen the people of Israel. He had blessed them so that they would be a blessing to others. But over time, as happens to you and me, they became focused on themselves. Rather than being externally focused, they became internally focused. and just basked in the blessing that God had given them. And it became harder, not easier, for people to connect with God. And it's into this context that Jesus told a story one day. A religious scholar came up to Jesus and asked Jesus a question. Jesus, in his typical fashion, responded to questions with another question. So asked this religious scholar, well, you tell me, you know the law, can you answer your own question? How do you sum up all the Hebrew scriptures? And this religious scholar came up with a great answer that Jesus loved. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, or your soul, or your strength, or your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Top of the class, great marks, great answer. And apparently tradition tells us that guys like him would recite this every morning before he went off to work. He knew this. And then in the midst of this dialogue, he turns to Jesus and asks, well, who is my neighbor? It's $1 million question, isn't it? Who is my neighbor? But the guy's not asking the question from a deep concern to know the answer, like he's ignorant of it. He asked the question because there's a little editorial note just before it. He wanted to justify his actions. It seems like this guy already had a definition of what neighbor is, who a neighbor is meant to be. He just wanted to justify his own actions, justify his own behavior. I'm guessing he had changed the scope of that to be, well, I can be neighborly when it doesn't inconvenience or disrupt my life. I can help someone who's just like me when it doesn't inconvenience me too much, I guess. So Jesus answered the question with a story. It's a well-known story, even in the wider community, wider city. People that don't know Jesus will refer to a story called the Good Samaritan. I'm guessing you've heard it too. And we often, when we hear the story of the Good Samaritan, we'll think of like random acts of kindness. Things that we kind of do in our life, but often things that don't actually disrupt us all too much. It can become such a warm story that we remind ourselves of or tell others, but not a story that's radical. And yet, in the context when Jesus told this story, it was explosive in its force. So I want to walk us through this story today, and I'd like you to try to hear it for the first time and think about it in its original context that it was in. Jesus begins the story this way. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, this was a genuine pathway from Jerusalem to Jericho, about 25, 30 kilometers long. It's almost like this a clip from a country western movie. It's kind of this dusty kind of wilderness thing with caves around it, and a kind of riffraff would hide out in the caves, and they would prey on people walking by. And notorious pathway that people knew at that time and knew the stories, often in kind of the front page of the Jerusalem Gazette at the time of things that would happen on that pathway. This guy's been beaten up. Now, normally, in our culture, just like theirs, you can kind of recognize people in a bunch of different ways. One of those is by clothing. That was particularly true at that time. You would know what country somebody was from, what religious background they had from the clothes that they wore. Problem is, this guy's clothes are stripped, so there's no way to know what country he's from, what religion he has, just don't know. Another way you'd kind of find out is that the language somebody spoke or the accent that they had. Are they from US? Are they from China? Are they from South Africa? But this guy's like half dead. He's not speaking. In other words, you have no idea who this guy is. If you see him on the side of the road, you don't know what his belief system is. You don't know whether he deserved to be there. Was it something he did? What's his background? What's his social status? You know nothing about him. He's just there. And you have to respond to if you're going to help him or not. So enter three characters, and you know the story. And because you know the story so well, I like us to think about this as a bit of a pantomime. So, often when you go to a pantomime, things happen, and you kind of get into it as an audience, right? You cheer for the good guys, you boo for the bad guys. So when you hear me say the word priest, I want you to cheer, yeah, because the priests, they were good guys at the time. This is how the audience would understand it. But when you hear me say the word Levite, I also want you to cheer. Yeah, because the Levites were really good people too. But when you hear the word Samaritan, I want you to boo, because the Samaritans at that time were bad people, cultural half-breeds, theological half-breeds. It was this derogative term that people used. That's how the audience would understand it. So let's practice, okay? So priests, Levites, Samaritans, Levites, Samaritans. Oh, you can do better than that. I want a bit more booing. Samaritans. Okay, so whenever I say those words, let's get into it. So Jesus tells a story. He's kind of set up the scene, and we have this guy who's been beaten up, lying there half dead, naked. So first guy enters the story. By chance, a priest came along. Now, what are the odds? I mean, chance, this is great opportunity. A priest. He was a good guy. I mean, he worshiped God in the temple. He served. He prayed for people. He would lead through the sacrifices. He's just been in Jerusalem, so he's been serving God, red hot passion for God. He's on his way back to Jericho, where most of the priests would live. Priests would live. So he's there. He's coming back, and suddenly he comes across this guy. How opportune is that? And not only that, but people in his group of people would also have great means available. He was in the upper class levels of society, so he had all the means to help this guy. So suddenly the priest comes on the scene looking really good. What great chance, what great opportunity. But when he saw the man lying there, he sees him. When he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road, passed him by. Now, we're not told why. No motive is given. So some people might talk about, well, if he touched the guy, he might become ceremonially unclean. But apparently, even in Judaism, you could see somebody on the side and help, and you wouldn't actually become ceremonially unclean. It might be that he's just busy. He's kind of on his way to get something done, maybe just inconvenience. Or perhaps he's afraid, like if this guy's still, warm, still seems to be kind of alive, maybe it's just happened. So it's kind of risky for him to act in some way. My hunch, though, it's probably just he had redefined neighbor to fit in his own system. He could help people who were just like him, but he doesn't know if this person is just like him. In fact, some of the ancient writings of that time say things like this. If you mean to do a kindness, choose the right person, then your good deeds will not be wasted. Do good to someone devout, and you will be rewarded. If not by that person, then certainly the Most High God. Give to the devout. Do not give to the help of a sinner. See, maybe this is a sinner. Maybe this guy had what was coming to him. Maybe he's from a different religion or different country or something, not like me. And so my guess is the priest walks on by. Another character enters the story. So too, Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by the other side. Now, Levites, I kind of think of them like puppies. Everybody likes puppies. They're the good guys. They're not, the priests. They were good too, but they're in the upper class of society. The Levites were a little bit like the ordinary person, more like you and me. And so they would do the donkey's work in the temple. They would the hard work. They'd be in there and doing the risk management, taking care of the property, making sure everything's working, doing a little bit of worship on the side. And this guy's on his way back from Jerusalem to Jericho too. And he's probably walking, doesn't have a horse like the other guy, and he stumbles across this guy too. And so the Levite, he sees him, continues to walk on by. Again, we're not given a motive. I guess he could say, well, if my boss just walked on by and left him here, who am I? My boss, he knows the scriptures really well, more than I do. So if he left him, who am I to step in and help in this way? And if he left him, for me to do something, it might be wrong. And for me to do something might be like blowing a whistle on my boss, will make my boss feel uncomfortable. For whatever reason, he continues to walk on by too. Now, there's a third character in the story, right? And you know who it is, but I want you to think about who the audience might have thought it was. You see, we're used to the jokes, aren't we? When there's three guys in a pub, there was a Kiwi and an Aussie, or a Kiwi, an Irishman, and an Aussie. And, and you're expecting the punchline to be on the Aussie, right? And you can tell me all of those jokes later. But it's the same thing back then. You're expecting the punchline to come in that third person. This is going to be the hero in the story. So who might that be? Guess, for me, if I was there, I might be thinking, well, this is going to be like the ordinary Joe, average Jewish guy. The guys that work in the temple, probably not so much, but the average guy stepping in. We all know the average churchgoer does all the work, so, they're going to step in and they're going to get the job done and be on their way. And then Jesus adds in this other character, a Samaritan. As he traveled, came to where the man was. When he saw him, he took pity on him. Now, the Samaritans were bad people, that they weren't liked. It was a derogative term because of the kind of, they were seen as these half-cultural mismatches, misbred, mistheological blend, weren't respected at all. They were the enemies to the Jews. Nobody was expecting this guy to help. And yet it's this guy that steps in. And suddenly the passage slows right down and fills in all these details because it wants us to camp on the action, the doing, the sacrifices of this guy. So he went to him. He bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, I guess like a disinfectant. Then he put the man on his donkey, which means he's probably a man of means, But you wouldn't put somebody else on your donkey and walk. That would be like a servant. But this guy's acting like a servant. They brought him to an inn. He took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. It would be the equivalent of paying for about 24 days, apparently, of care. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have. Effectively giving, the innkeeper the credit card to say, bill me for any expenses that come up, and I'll come back and I'll square the account later. See, this guy, at great cost to himself, is disrupting his life. Now, the original audience of the time, when they're hearing the characters, they hear the word priest, they hear the word Levite, they're expecting good things. But who is it that helps? It's the Samaritan. And everything changes. And that's the story that Jesus told that day. And because it's the end of the story, our pantomime responses can kind of end at that point too. You see that Jesus tells a story and then he raises a question to this religious scholar that asked the question about who was my neighbor. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the one who was attacked by bandits? It's interesting the way Jesus frames the question. Because it's a very different question to what the guy had asked. This is the original one. The man wanted to justify his action, so he asked, who was my neighbor? You see, for the scholar, he sees neighbor like some object. And you try to theoretically think through, who is this person I'm meant to help? And you're in kind of the superior role as you try to think about who the neighbor is. Jesus changes the vantage point and says, from the vantage point of the guy lying here on the ground, who is the neighbor? Who actually was neighborly and did something? And the guy catches it. He can't use the S word. He just says, the one who showed him mercy, the one who did something. To which Jesus replies, yes, so now go and do the same. Be neighborly to others. Forget about who the neighbor is, just be neighborly. That when you encounter need, actively allow your life to be disrupted by the need. It's hard, isn't it? You see all the reasons the Samaritan had for not doing something were there in the same way. He could have just thought about where the priest was and thought about where the Levite was. All those same reasons are true for him. No doubt he had something to do. It was disrupting his schedule. How much means did he have? Does he really want to use that as disrupting his finances? Maybe the robbers might prey on him. There's a risk to him. He doesn't know who this guy is either, whether this guy deserved it or not. And yet the Samaritan of all people steps in and becomes the neighbor. Costs him something. He actively allowed his life to be disrupted by need. This sounds awfully like the gospel, doesn't it? We were lying on the ground, abandoned, dying. We were completely helpless, unable to do anything about our own condition. And yet Jesus saw us. He got off his horse, cleaned us up, bandaged our wounds, carried us to get some help. At great cost to himself, paid for our expenses, and promised that one day he would return to finish the job. He is the Good Samaritan. Jesus did not have to step into our story. He did not have to stop and help these helpless people who had snubbed their noses at him. And yet for Jesus, there is no limit to love. He did all that was necessary, actively allowing his life to be disrupted by your need and my need. And he walked the road to Jericho, the road to Calvary, the road to the cross, and did everything that was necessary. You see, the point of this parable is not just some moralistic tale that we need to do some random acts of kindness. It's to say, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is what it means to walk in the way of Jesus. That Jesus has been neighborly to you. That Jesus has no limit to the love he has for you and me. And so to be a follower of Jesus is to walk the same Jericho road, the same Calvary road, and allow your life to be disrupted by need. That whatever mess you find, whatever financial mishap, however it affects your schedule, whatever preferences you have to give up for another, for that outward arrow, that you would allow that to happen for the sake of others. See, it's easy, isn't it, to limit the scope of that outward arrow to, when we can manage something or when it doesn't hurt us so much. We're at the mall and we see somebody with a white bucket and for some cause, and we walk past and we throw some coins in or a $5 note and we feel good about ourselves. But our lives aren't really disrupted by need. Or we might step in some random act of kindness, but our lives aren't really disrupted by need. And Jesus says to be neighborly means that when you see that need, you step in and you bring the limitless love that Jesus has given to us towards the other. And you're neighborly. This is the vision Jesus has for the church. And it's so easy for it to become about us. Jesus reminds us it's about the other. There's different ways we can apply this. A lot of you, as I've been talking, probably have in mind somebody in your street, somebody at work, somebody at university, wherever that there's kind of a need and you need to come around it. Love you to come around that need. I'd like to take a few minutes, though, to think about, what does this mean as a community to apply this? I think so often we dart in the individual direction, which is great, but I think there's ways that we as a local church who have all the resources of Jesus at our disposal, which can really be the hope of the world. How can we as a local church step in and allow our lives to actively be disrupted by need? I want to talk about 4 things, 4 ways we can apply this as a whole faith community. The first thing is this, and I'd encourage you to, if you came in today, you should have received one of these postcards. If you can grab that now, I have it in front of you. If you don't have this, just put your hand up. If you need a pen, put your hand up too. I'm going to get you to fill in some things in a moment. The first application I'd like to throw your way is to engage in CityServe. This is a new initiative for us as a faith community. It's going to be in the middle of October, where we get to, as a community, blitz our city with neighborly good deeds. There's a whole lot of ideas that have already been thrown in the mix and different partnerships formed, we want to hear some ideas for other projects. So here are some that have already been discussed. Partnership with the Auckland City Mission, Ronald McDonald House with the Working Bee and different crafts for the kids there, Onehunga Town Centre cleanup, Ellerslie Town Centre cleanup, painting of electricity boxes, Plunkett, a whole bunch of different things going on. Basically, we're trying to blitz our community in ways where our community, our city, sees those needs, and we're stepping in to incarnate into their world, into the needs that they see around them, in tangible ways that we can do straight off, with the hope that this breaks down some of the walls that people have against Christianity. People are skeptical at best about local churches. Doing projects like this helps those walls to break down so that we can engage in conversation and we can develop a greater reputation and relationship with our community. I think this will also allow us to connect with people who don't yet know Jesus relationally. It will be a catalyst towards a whole lot of other needs that we'll see, needs that we're not even yet aware of, but being able to form relationships long haul into something new and fresh. And it's a community way of applying this passage in a very tangible way. So if you have some projects that you'd like us to come around and explore for you to shape, love you to fill that in. Sandra's going to be in the foyer after the service. You kind of see a board that looks just like this out there. She would love to chat to you as well. So fill that in, give it to one of the ushers, give it to the reception desk, or go hand it in to her. But set aside that date. We'll have more information for you later as we get closer to that. But this is one way, as a church, we're going to apply this passage. There's some other ways, though, because we have, effectively all of our ministries here at GCC are designed to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. So here's the next one. To create and commit to a plan to support your church financially. Giving, we don't tend to talk about it here a lot. Not very, popular often to talk about either because it's kind of a cynicism attached to some of those things. But giving is a community way. Church, there we go, where we as a local church come around need and say, with all of our combined resources that God has given us anyway, we're all chipping in together to support what happens here in our ministries, because all of our ministries, again, are geared to lead people into this growing relationship with Jesus. And so we have these offering bags, or we give by AP or PushPay or whatever it is, because we're wanting to fuel and fund the ministry and missions of God in this place. Now I get it, a regular plan is hard. When you actually sit down and you go, okay, well, these are the means at my disposal. I like to give, X percentage of that to, the work of God in this place. You suddenly see that, and it's hard. And often, in theory, we think, the more money we have in our income, the more proportionately that we can give. Research actually says the opposite. It says the less people have at their disposal, normally they give more proportionately. And it kind of makes sense, even though it goes against everything we know. If all you have is $10 and you give $1 of that away, you can't actually do a lot with $1. If all you have is $100 and you give $10 of that away, well, there's not a whole lot you can do with $10. But when you have, $10,000 at your disposal and you give like 1,000 of that away, you start to think, don't you, about the things you could do with that $1,000. Or if you have $100,000 in your income and you give like 10,000 of that away, suddenly you think about, that holiday and that thing I could do around the house, and that it's hard, isn't it? I found this when Robin and I were setting up our AP here for GCC, and looked at that and kind of multiplying it out by the months and started to think, I'd love to, we could do this, and that holiday, and we could do this other thing, and you start to go there for a moment, don't you? Just as you're kind of hovering over the button on the, and I had to set up an AP because I forget all the time about all these things. So it's kind of all there. But it's hard. And yet, I had to step back and think, well, actually, the reason we're doing this is for others. The reason we're doing this is that we get to actually step in and allow our lives to be disrupted, our finances, our budget to be disrupted because of the need, knowing that we're part of this community that gets to support the work of God in our city. Now, about 30 or 40% of us have entered into a plan like that, which means about 60, 70% of us haven't so much. And my guess is that it's just one of those things. You haven't just got around to it. I don't think, most of us aren't selfish people. It's just we haven't got around to it. You love your church, you love what happens here, you love all the different ministries, just you haven't actually taken the step to financially invest in what's going on. My plea to you is just if you can step in and participate in that too, to step in and go, I'm going to allow my life to be financially disrupted to participate in the work of God in this place. I think that's one of the community ways of applying this passage. Number 3, to invite people to one of our services or ministries. Again, everything that's going on here is designed to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. So today, in the foyer and just at the back here, are a whole range of ministries, not all of them, but a whole range of ministries, because I want you to familiarize yourself with what's going on. So that when you're familiar with it, it means you can invite people to what's happening. Lately, I've been thinking about these 3 knots. And they're kind of like little prompts for me that when I'm chatting to a friend, when I'm talking to the hairdresser or something comes up and I hear these little knots, it's almost like this prompt to me to go, oh, I should invite them. I should invite this person to this thing we have going on at church. So, things that are not going well. I was not prepared for it. I'm not in church. So, it might be something like this. Here's Nisha, and you're chatting to Nisha, and she says, things are not going well for me financially. My credit card debt is out. I'm just trying to work it. It's tearing out my head with finances and budgeting. And you say, oh, Nisha, we have some people at church who can help you with that. We have this group called CAP, the right design to help people with budgeting, to help people who get themselves into debt. I'd love you to meet them. Or you meet somebody here like Dave and Steph. And maybe one day, Steph says to you, oh, things are not going well for us. Dave has lost his job. Our marriage is a little tense at the moment. So you listen, and then you kind of step in and you say, well, hey, you should come to our church. We have this thing called Job Club, CAP Job Club. Dave could learn to put his resume together, get some interview skills, find some help with just some support of other people who are looking for work. We have some proactive marriage tools as well, some coaching around that. But people at our church who would love to help in some way. Or you meet somebody like, Elijah's parents. And they're saying, things are not going well for me at home. Elijah's stressing me out. He looks cute, but behind that facade, things are hard. And you say, well, you should come to our church because we have like all these new environments, for new generation environments and people that provide proactive parenting help, and we can partner you with people with that. Just be absolutely fantastic. We'd love to help you. Not going well. Or things that I was not prepared for that. So, William's parents come into the country and they were not prepared for stepping into a new culture and the language of all of that. And you say, well, we have this English class, ESOL classes, and there's like a couple of hundred people learning English at our church every week. You should come along to that. Love to introduce you to a few people. Or, Roger, I was not prepared for retirement. Haven't financially prepared for that. Still trying to work out what I'm meant to do through the day. I thought it would be easy. Just not prepared for this kind of loneliness I'm going through. Hey, you should come to our church. We have this generations group. Love you to connect with other people. Some seminars to help you in retirement. Whole bunch of different things going on. Or I was not prepared for trying to run this household with all these crazy kids around. You should come to our mainly music group on Fridays, all designed for preschoolers. All these different needs that we have where people can come around and find the help that they need. You see, we're a church of diverse communities of people. And we're putting things in place to reach diverse communities of people right throughout our city. So Not in Church is another one. So next week we kick off a series. I'd love you to invite friends. It's a series all about this between times we find in life where it gets hard. And you experience those, I experience those, your friends and neighbors experience those. Together we want to find help in those difficult land between seasons in life. Now, because our services are not just designed for us, but they're also designed for others. And so a few weeks ago, or back in when we spoke about our Go Beyond vision, I mentioned that around now we would launch 3 different style services. And so that's going to happen the very first Sunday of July, so just a couple of weeks' time. They're 3 contemporary, distinct services, kind of more subtly different, but all designed not really for you or for me, but for others. Because we realize, again, that there is no one size fits all. if we're a church that's reaching diverse groups of people, we want to provide some diversity in kind of, I guess, the styles of service that we have. So next week, I'll give you a blurb of each one of those, the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock and the 6:30. They're not radically distinct, just kind of like subtle aspects attached to those. Again, not for you, but for our wider city. And you'll see those blurbs next week so you can kind of breathe easy and go, oh, it's not as bad as I was thinking. Or, oh, yeah, this is going to be really good. Or, when you start thinking about friends, you can start to think, what service might be best for them? For the Rogers, nearing retirement, through to the, niches with young children, to whoever that is, adapting ourselves to whoever needs to be there. Because, when we come together, there's some musical styles that connect with us and don't connect with others, or a little too loud sometimes, or not loud enough, or a little bit too repetitive, or not repetitive enough. All these different things happen, right? So trying to provide spaces, diversity, realizing everybody's different. And we want to come around some of those differences with these 3 contemporary styles. And we'll launch that and are going to be working towards those beginning in a couple of weeks' time. I'll give you that information next week. So, inviting people to one of our services, to one of our ministries. And final one is this. I want you to jump in and serve somewhere, anywhere. One of the things I love about GCC, and there's lots of them, one of them is that there's so many people here who actively enrich our church by serving, bringing hope towards people in our city through what they're doing. As your pastor, I would love all of you to be involved in that. And so today, again, in the foyer is a whole range of our ministries. I would love you to look at that and go, yeah, I'd like to give this a try. There's a form you received in your bulletin. Here's some of those too, where you can just indicate, yeah, I'd like to find out more information about this. I'm not saying I'm doing it yet, I'm just finding out some more information. And then you might step in and go, okay, I'm going to give this a try. You're not signing your life, forever on that. If a few weeks into it you're going, yeah, actually that's not quite me. That's okay, just let us know. We'll find another place for you to try, another place for you to try, another place for you to try, till you find a place where you enjoy and it's kind of like your passion and it's around your abilities and you feel like you're part of this team and you know what you're doing and you're fully on board with what's going on. Just want to find a fit for everybody here so that all of us together can use our time, even when it becomes disruptive to our schedules, because what we're doing as a community, as a family, is there for the sake of people in our city. So if you could fill that in, chat to people in the foyer, in the back of the room afterwards, I would love to see everyone here jumping in to serve somewhere, anywhere. There's a lot of information to go through. But the bottom line is this. When encountering need, I actively allow my life to be disrupted by need. My time, my finances, my comfortable aspects, my preferences, my musical preferences, my seat, whatever that is. Because we're a church for others. The local church really is the hope of the world. And Jesus wants to use you and me to connect people with himself, that they too would come and experience that hope, experience his blessing. Let's pray together.